In order to transform our JSX into ES5 and to transform our es6 into equivalent ES5, we're going to be using a project called Webpack. Webpack is a tool that allows you to use es6 features in any ES5 compliant browser. What it will do is, here we have, for example, an es6 arrow function. It will take that and convert it to an equivalent ES5 version without the arrow function. In addition to applying these es6 transformations, it can also do React transformations, as we'll see over here. And ultimately, we're going to be using this project together with Webpack, so that way we can get both project bundling and these transformations. But let's see how we can use Babel independently. Start with, if we have a blank project, we're going to say npm init and go through and create a new project, because we're going to be installing the Babel tool through npm. And again, even though this is going to be a front-end project, not a Node project, we are going to be running Babel with Node to transform this code. So Node is kind of a development dependency for our project, even though in production we won't be using Node. So go through. You'd want to populate this with actual information for your real projects, but this will be sufficient for ours. And we'll see we have a package.json here. Usually I would go ahead and do a git init at this point and add that to my Git repo. Next, we're going to install Babel CLI. Like so. And notice we did save dev instead of save. The difference between the two is a little bit more semantics. You know, for dependencies that we only need for development purposes, we'll often do save dev instead. And this should finish in just a moment here. Sometimes Node has to build it if there are compiled components, all done. And again, this whole compiled components aspect up here is why you typically want to avoid checking in the compiled Node modules to your source repository. And see in here, have all the different dependencies for Babel, as long as Babel itself. And additionally, in our package.json, it now includes Babel CLI. So as Babel can apply multiple different transformations to your project, we have to explicitly say which transformations we want to enable. So we have to opt into React transformations as well as ES 2015/ES6 transformations. Now, if you used an older version of Babel, this might seem different, because in prior versions of Babel, prior to Babel 6, I believe it was, they enabled some of these transformations by default. But currently, in the latest version of Babel, at the time of this recording, there are no default transformations, so you must opt into all of them. So what we're also going to do is we're going to install those transformations. And the command for that is going to be npm install Babel preset ES 2015. Later on for our React project, we'll also be installing a React preset. So go ahead and enter that in. Should install in just a moment. And we'll see that, once again, our package.json has been updated. Another change from Babel 5 was people used to run the Babel CLI as a global command line hook. You can still do that if you installed it through npm install g, but this can create issues because, for one, your environment has an implicit dependency, and secondly, if you have different projects that use different versions of Babel, which can often happen, it's better to not have these global versions of Babel floating around your system. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into Node Modules, Babel CLI, bin Babel, and we can invoke Babel from there. But since that's a little bit, hairy of a command right here, we're instead going to alias this with npm task. So going into package.json, we're going to add a new script called build. And another benefit through doing it here is that whenever you run any npm command, so when we say npm run build, anything right over here is going to look not only your usual system path, but temporarily speaking, it's going to add node modules to that system path so that we don't have to type out the full node modules bin, so on and so forth. We can just say Babel CLI. So what we're going to do is we're going to say Babel to invoke the Babel command. We're going to point it at which file we want. Here we'll just say script.js. We're going to output it to a directory called dist, short for distribution. You can name it whatever you like. Save it. And when we run it, initially it's going to say script.js doesn't exist, but notice it is successfully invoking the Babel command. So let's go ahead and both create that distribution and create a script.js. So a fairly basic ES6 feature is the let variable for block scoping. And what I mean by that is, unlike most languages, JavaScript does not give you scoping for blocks. It only gives you scoping for functions. So if we do something like if true, var x is equal to 4, console.log x. In most languages, x would be out of scope after the block is over. But in JavaScript, x will still be in scope after that block, and we'll be able to successfully print out 4. Now, the new es6 let feature, so if we declare this variable with let, that will give us block scoping. So after this is done, x will be out of scope. For example, if I run this with Node that has es6 enabled, notice we're going to get x is not defined. So this works great with Node because it has es6 and it'll work fine with an es6 browser, but let's compile this to es5 so that way our clients with older browsers can still use it. Let's run npm run build again, and we'll see this time that it did successfully build from script into distribution script.js, but the problem is going to be we haven't actually enabled any of those transformations even though we've installed them. So it ran through, it successfully built, so to speak, but it didn't actually change any of the underlying code. The simplest way to bring in these transformations is, 1, install a preset, and secondly, we have to read from a Babel RC file, which will specify which presets we want to use. I'm just going to cat this string out to .babelrc, verifying we do have the Babel RC file here, and the contents of it are presets ES 2015. So this is a configuration object saying that, or just configuration JSON specifically, saying that the presets we want to use just ES 2015. Later on, we'll be doing React for JSX. You can apply more sophisticated configuration in here as well. But pretty soon we're going to be moving on to Webpack, so we won't dwell too much on the details of this, but no, they are there. Now, when we run npm run build again and look at distribution, we're going to see that it added use strict up here. And notice it changed my let to a var. And furthermore, it renamed it to _x instead of x, so that way it's unavailable down here. Now that might seem kind of gimmicky and be like, well, yeah, that would work, but what if I would have named my variable _x? Like so. Build in again. And we'll see that it gave one _x2 and left the other one as _x. You can keep going through this and playing with seeing how these ES6 features get compiled to ES5. But my point being, this is a very robust production-ready tool. Likely, you won't be able to trick it. While it can be kind of interesting to apply these see how these transformations are applied, day in, day out, it's not going to be extremely relevant. You can just write your ES6 code and let Babel take care of the rest. Next, we'll be seeing how to use Webpack, and then after that, how we're going to integrate Webpack and Babel together for our React projects.